Interesting, huh? Piano and xylophone. Anyways, welcome to my review for Sonic R on the Sega Saturn. Sonic R is a Sonic the Hedgehog game that was released for the Sega Saturn in the mid to late 1990s, and definitely this was one of those Sonic the Hedgehog games that were not like really classic, but more like of just interesting historical error. Definitely some of the most interesting moments in Sega's history is when Sega was making a mistake as opposed to creating a gift, Because not all gifts will work out. Some gifts can turn into nasty surprises, especially if you're not aware of what's going on. So, this is a vid game review for Sonic R for the Sega Saturn console, and I will be reading this vid game review with a voice I had in the 1990s in the privacy of my own home growing up when I was reading out Sonic's ideas in the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books I was reading as a kid growing up. So I will be reading this review as if I would be reading out Sonic's voice in my fashion in the privacy of my own home, as if like I was reading Sonic the Hedgehog comics without reference to the cartoons and such. In case you do not know, in the 1990s, it was not yet for certain what Sonic the Hedgehog's voice should really sound like. His voice was changing in the cartoons, and often the cartoons received mixed reactions, and they created video games for the Sega Dreamcast and other feature Sega games that did different manipulations of Sonic the Hedgehog's voice. I would say it's only been for the last 15 or so years for Sega that Sega fans have come to know consistently and with absolute confidence what Sonic the Hedgehog's voice should sound like. And I'm going to read this review with a type of voice acting in which I am going to pretend that I am a kid in the 1990s growing up reading Sonic's ideas from Sonic's comics, as if I would be reading his comics without actually knowing what the cartoons were and without knowing what the future of Sonic's voice would be like. So I would say from the years 1991 to 1998 in my childhood, according to my private reading in my pedantic private home, this is what Sonic's voice sounded like to me as a kid when I read his voice out loud in my own private reading of Sonic's comics growing up. And you will crack up at this, because you will, after hearing this review, you will appreciate what it really means in life to have privacy and publicity in life. So hear this out. Here it goes. The game doesn't show up on the screen. No, I'm kidding. What I mean to say is that our game doesn't seem to be represented well on TV. Each turn is swirling and each move is tumbling. At times we see 3D games of this nature. In general, the 3D games appear to show something on TV different from what the games actually are. As proof of this, my Sega Saturn console would be totally useless without a TV. Programmers have to manage getting the TV running based on the game, not exactly on their imagination. Our minds are important because we perceive colors and visuals just inside of us, and the outside world is just another source like candy to bread. However, a TV ought to show what our minds can handle. Calling Sonic R decent is fallacy, mythological, and lazy. On my very first race as Sonic the Hedgehog, the world's fastest runner, my tracks lead me into finishing dead last. Whatever the graphics are, I can't really see the game, and the game seems hidden inside the Saturn without the visual transference. It's as if Sega knew about the physics issues. They placed as few racing courses in Sonic R as possible. From the small variety in courses and characters, the same old guts of Sonic's failed racing game will rest under the lids of devoted, nostalgic masochists. 3D is substantial when the evidence is in the pudding. By playing the game, I've encountered terrific forms of beauty which relate better for another game in mind. Maybe a space shooter or something. Sonic himself definitely appears to move like a UFO, or perhaps a claw machine for prizes. Course designs get real while the fastest blue hedgehog in the world can't seem to get a grip on his physics towards movements between curves and dead ends. Sonic R is built with a poor control scheme. L and R shift Sonic and his friends left and right in subtle steering mode, but pushing L and R at once will make him stop, and as such, it's possible to intend for Sonic to shift left and R only for him to suddenly stop. One time, my blue hedgehog stopped dead when I didn't push either L or R. It also doesn't really feel like my analog thumb pad can really go in 360-degree angles for Sonic R. The whole world in the game is mapped wrong. And how could Eggman have pushed Sonic in front of him when the blue hedgehog was in the water below the Doctor, who was flying over the water? The game is definitely buggy. A nice soundtrack plays, but I'd rather listen to it without playing Sonic R. Sonic's world on his R game especially has a whirling visual effect. The longer you play, you'll see a spinning metal head reflecting the download icon. You'll see an island shift its gears. You'll see flashing puddles across the gateways as further and such. Can't you see? Asks the odd singer. Oh, no. The game keeps telling me I haven't collected Chaos Emeralds when clearly I've got one. Amy is a stereotype for females. Weak and helpless under the other men. Is Sonic a man? Maybe. Okay. Alright, that's the end of my review. Could you imagine if Sonic the Hedgehog actually sounded like that? Well, that shows you right there, if you use your imagination in the privacy of your own home, that you could create your own art in your mind, even if you may not really know it yet. So, that is a review done with my voice acting as if I was my own private, imaginary Sonic character in my own private home, reading out loud in the 1990s without Sonic TV awareness. So yeah, very interesting, and definitely let's keep this in mind. Possibilities can seem very endless in art, just as long as you know which possibilities are greater than others. You know, because there are different kinds of possibilities. I mean, you cannot treat them all the same way. And definitely some people would hear that and would maybe get a little bit freaked out, or they would even say, hey, that's not Sonic's voice. And I would tell people, well, yeah, but when I was growing up in the 1990s, reading Sonic comics without really knowing the Sonic TV cartoons that existed, and when I was just guessing in my private reading what Sonic's voice sounded like, what else was I supposed to do with my voice? You see, with private reading of books, especially when you read books that were invented before any electronic devices were invented, like, radio and TV and radios and such, when you read those out loud, you soon begin to realize that at times it is a matter of opinion what a good tone of voice is, or what a bad tone of voice is. And definitely it does depend on the ideas, because obviously the voice alone is not really what makes a character's voice. It also depends on the ideas. And fortunately, as you know, Sonic's voice today doesn't sound like that. His voice would sound something like, yeah, this is happening. that's how it would sound like. It would sound more like a hyper masculine man sort of sound. As in, like, the kind of guy who is more muscular, beefy, and into the speed of the universe. My private voice from the 1990s sounds more like, I would say kind of more like a Rockies and Bullwinkle mockery, if you think about it, because the Sonic comics contained a lot of, like, depending on the versions of the comics you're reading, and I read a lot of versions in the 1990s, like, there were a lot of animals in the Sonic stories. So when I was reading the comics privately without referring to cartoon TV, I would read out voices as if, like, I was, like, maybe someone from a Disney movie, or someone from a Looney Tunes show, or someone from a Six Flags advertisement, or someone from a Burger King commercial. Like, I was mixing up voices in my head while reading to show myself in my own mind, in my private reading, what the Sonic characters would be like to my own private world of reading. And definitely keep this in mind, and hopefully you have a good day. And this video should teach you all the wonderful magic and spirit and soul there could be in having your own private reading with your own private voice to bring your own private characters of a comic book to life in your own private way and fashion. Take care and happy holidays.